Hi, I'm Max Brantley with the Arkansas Times on Monday, July 20th. News from Arkansas. Let's start with some old news. Arkansas had a couple of presidential candidates in town over the weekend. Donald Trump spoke to a Republican fundraising and dinner in Hot Springs Friday night. Hillary Clinton, the Democratic candidate, spoke to the state Democratic Party's annual Jefferson Jackson Day dinner in North Little Rock on Saturday night. Hillary drew a bigger crowd. She said that the Democratic Party was the party of the future. Sort of an ironic thing for a 67-year-old person to say, but she showed a lot of energy. The good news, I think, out of the Democratic Party gathering was the number of young people there. There is some enthusiasm among younger people. They're going to need it to pick up the sort of people that powered Barack Obama 8 years ago. Donald Trump said some of his usual stuff. He saved his big news for the next day when he went to Iowa and said that John McCain, despite being a POW during the Vietnamese War, was not a war hero. And then the next day doubled down, as they say, and didn't apologize for it. Some people think this is the end of the Donald Trump. Some people think this is just Donald Trump being Donald Trump. I know that if I were the Arkansas Republican Party, I wouldn't be bragging about my speaker last week. The Democrats felt a lot better about theirs. Elsewhere in state politics, there's been a spate of stories about how people in public office who talk a lot about small government and looking after the interests of the little man manage to spend a lot of money once they get in public office. There's been news in the last 3 or 4 days of a couple of $25,000 pay raises for members of the governor's staff. They were promoted to higher positions, he would say. The Arkansas Treasurer's Office, which has been just nearly a comic cavalcade of misadventures since Dennis Milligan took over, has given huge pay raises to the top 3 people in his office, none of whom are particularly qualified for the jobs they've held, several of whom have caused problems for the office. Some are involved in lawsuits that are still pending in state and federal court. One of them, Jim Harris, who was a TSA agent before he fell in with Dennis Milligan, got raised $106,000 a year. He is Mike Huckabee's brother-in-law. Maybe that's qualifications enough for a pretty sweet suck on a state nozzle. Elsewhere, but big news today on the Arkansas blog is I got access to a document that shows the incredible pay raises passed out by the Arkansas Supreme Court to their administrative assistants and law clerks, particularly those that work for the members of the court that have fast become, somewhat in secret, the ruling hands behind the Arkansas Supreme Court. This would be Courtney Goodson, Karen Baker, Rhonda Wood, and Joe Hart. Their people got big raises as high as 36% for a 4-year clerk for Karen Baker. Unbelievable pay raises. They won't justify why they did it. I hope to get more information on that later today. Speaking of the Arkansas Supreme Court, Sean Womack, a former Republican senator and now a circuit judge in Mountain Home, is so far unopposed for a seat on the Arkansas Supreme Court being vacated by retiring Paul Danielson. Got a copy of a letter that he sent out yesterday jumping off a criminal case because he said he just wasn't qualified to hear a criminal case, but he is qualified to run for Supreme Court. He's also the man that says we ought to recriminalize homosexual behavior and prevent gay people from having children. He's qualified for some things, Supreme Court, I'm not so sure. Also in the law, the Attorney General's office today has turned down 2 more efforts to certify a petition to the ballot that would legalize marijuana, and also turned down an effort to repeal Amendment 94. This was the amendment that gave public officials huge pay raises and also loosened term limits. She says that all these proposals are ambiguous and need more detail. They may yet be back. Over the weekend, Martin Marietta, the big defense contractor, floated the USS Little Rock, a new combat ship named after our city. It didn't sink, I'm happy to say. That Jefferson Jackson Day dinner, which was a huge success for the Democrats, wasn't so big a success at the after party at South of Main on Main Street. 5 people were robbed by the same gunman going to and from the event, and so far he has not yet been caught. There was some awfully tough talk by Arkansans over the weekend. U.S. Senator Tom Cotton went on Meet the Press and talked again about the need to not do any deals with Iran. He'd rather go to war with them, I think. Wesley Clerk said we ought to think about internship camps for radicalized Muslims. Amazing talk when we saw how badly they were used in World War II against Japanese Americans. And finally, people stood in line 30 minutes a day in Fayetteville to get a hamburger at one of the new Whataburgers. Guns are not allowed in Whataburgers. Good thing tempers might have run high there. I'm Max Brantley. Back tomorrow.